Imagine a family so powerful, they didn't just rule a city, they bought the heavens. They were bankers who committed every sin imaginable, then spent a fortune to bribe God for their salvation. This is the story of the Medici, the men who funded the world's greatest art to wash the blood from their hands. April 26, 1478. The bells of the Florence Cathedral, the Duomo, rang not for celebration, but as a signal for murder. As the priest lifted the bread during High Mass, daggers were drawn. Giuliano de' Medici fell first, his body pierced 19 times. His brother Lorenzo fought back, barricading himself in the sacristy as blood pooled on the marble floor. This was the Pazzi conspiracy, a desperate attempt by rival bankers and the Pope himself to extinguish the Medici flame forever. But they failed. Lorenzo survived, and his vengeance was absolute. The conspirators were hunted down. Their bodies hung from the windows of the government palace as a gruesome warning. The Medici were no longer just bankers, they were the uncrowned kings of Florence, ruling through fear, money, and an obsession with beauty. But to understand how they reached this peak, we must look back to the mud and the wool of their humble beginnings. The Medici were not born with blue blood. In the beginning, they were simple merchants from the Mugello Valley. Their rise began with Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici. He didn't use a sword to conquer, he used a ledger. Giovanni founded the Medici Bank in 1397, and within decades it became the most powerful financial institution in Europe. He made a strategic move that changed history. He became the banker to the Pope. Every tithe, every indulgence paid to the church in Rome passed through Medici hands. But there was a problem. In the eyes of the church, charging interest, usury, was a mortal sin. The Medici were accumulating a fortune that, according to the Bible, would lead them straight to hell. To save their souls, they began a transaction with the divine. They decided to bribe God with art. Every chapel they built, every painting they commissioned was a payment for their sins. They transformed their tainted money into the glory of the Renaissance. When Giovanni died, he left his empire to his son, Cosimo. If Giovanni was the builder, Cosimo was the master manipulator. He understood that in a republic like Florence, people hated kings but followed money. He never held a formal office, yet nothing happened in the city without his approval. Cosimo's greatest gamble was architectural. He funded Filippo Brunelleschi to build a dome for the Florence Cathedral, a feat thought impossible by every architect in Europe. For years, the city watched as a massive brick mountain rose into the sky without any wooden support. When it was finished, the Duomo became the heartbeat of Florence. Cosimo also opened the first public library and welcomed scholars fleeing from a falling Constantinople. He wasn't just hoarding wealth, he was hoarding knowledge, surrounding himself with the ghosts of Plato and the genius of Donatello. Then came Lorenzo. If Cosimo was the brain, Lorenzo was the soul of the Renaissance. Under his rule, Florence became a living museum. Lorenzo was a poet, a diplomat, and a talent scout. He discovered a young boy named Michelangelo carving marble in the street and took him into his palace, treating him like a son. He commissioned Botticelli to paint goddesses in a time when only saints were allowed. But Lorenzo's brilliance had a dark side. His obsession with art led him to neglect the bank. Money began to dry up, and his political enemies grew bold. He spent his final days listening to the fiery sermons of a monk named Savonarola, who claimed that the Medici's love for art and luxury was a path to damnation. The Golden Age was ending, and a storm of religious fanaticism was about to break over the city. After Lorenzo's death, the Medici were exiled. Then they returned as dukes. Then they became popes and queens of France. They survived wars, scandals, and assassinations. But eventually the line grew thin. In 1737, the last of the Medici, Anna Maria Luisa, stood alone in her palace. She had no heirs, and her family's empire was about to be snatched by foreign powers. In one final, brilliant act of defiance, she signed the family pact. She gave every painting, every statue, and every palace the Medici had ever owned to the people of Tuscany, on the condition that not a single piece would ever leave Florence. Today, the bank is gone. The family name is a memory, but when you look at the statue of David, when you stand under Brunelleschi's dome, you are looking at the Medici. They proved that while gold can buy power, only art can buy immortality. They were the bankers who bought us the modern world.